G'day YouTube, Quacker John here. Today Alan and I are chatting about de-restricting the Vulcan S. First we will discuss why a person would de-restrict their Vulcan S and the advantages and disadvantages of de-restricting your bike, and then we will go into the specifics of the throttle stop bolt and the 4-pin plug. G'day Alan, how you going?
G'day, mate.
Okay Alan, what happens when you de-restrict the Vulcan S?
Everybody wants to know that. When you de-restrict the bike, what you're gaining is power. That's what you're gaining. It's a one-word sentence. What you're unleashing, the Kawasaki 650 engine by manufacturer's estimation is about 60 horsepower, and when you're de-restricting it, you're basically allowing the bike to reach its maximum horsepower. When it's restricted, it's limited based on whatever the country's or the state's rules and regulations are. And those in Australia specifically is 150 kW, 150 kilowatts per metric ton. That's a power to weight ratio that they use across the board for learner approved motorcycles, the LAMS bikes. And they get to that point by, they put a throttle stop in it, and that's what happens.
So what would you say are the advantages and disadvantages of de-restricting your Vulcan S?
Advantages, obviously you're going to get more power. You're giving it full throttle. You're allowing the engine to get the full fuel and air mixture that's the engine's wanting at whatever RPM you're at or whatever speed you're at. And there's a lot of videos out there, and you, John, have experienced the same thing. We've had some other guys within our forum that have experienced the same thing. There is a lot more power to be gained. That's the advantage. The disadvantage, probably there's, I don't know, it's 2 or 3 things. One, unless you're fully approved to ride a motorcycle that's de-restricted, that's a legal obligation. I mean, I guess you have to, in certain countries, ride a year or 2. I think it's 2 years, right, in Australia. You have to ride a motorcycle, no tickets, no accidents, whatever, and then you can de-restrict your bike. So there's that. There's some legal parts of it. The other piece of it is de-restricting could potentially increase your insurance. So you're going to have to pay more money to insure the bike because some countries, some states say that real powerful motorcycles cause more accidents, more people get killed on them. They run all these charts. And lastly, if you're ever involved in an accident, whether it's your fault or not, let's say you run off the road because somebody cut in front of you, or you get rear-ended or whatever, if there's an investigation of your motorcycle and they find that your bike has been de-restricted and it wasn't registered that way, you're going to get in big trouble. There's going to be fines. You could lose your license. There's other legal issues that you'll have to deal with. So in the United States, we have no restrictions on any motorcycle at any time. You could be a brand new motorcyclist, just got your license, 18 years old, and go find the most powerful motorcycle in the world, you know, the KZ10 or the Hayabusa or whatever it's called, any motorcycle you want, and go ride it. There's no restrictions. Other parts of the world, not the case. Europe, the UK, Australia. So there's all of that.
Yeah, I spoke to a Kawasaki dealer, and I was surprised about this, but what he told me was, even if you're on a full motorcycle license, it's illegal to de-restrict the Vulcan S. And if the police know, they'll fine you. And he said it's because it's a LAMS bike in Australia, and you can't de-restrict it under any circumstances. So I'll just put that out there so those who are watching this video know what that dealer said.
Now, can you take a lamb's bike and make it register it as a de-restricted lamb's bike, or they just don't want you to de-restrict any lamb's bike?
Well, yeah, I understand what you're saying. I haven't spoken to motor vehicles about it here in Australia, um, but I think it's set as a land spike and can't be changed.
Yeah, and you and I've talked about this a little bit. I think if you wanted to do that, you probably could, but you can't go back. That's what I've read online and in the forums and whatnot. You can get the authorization to de-restrict it, but you can't go back and restrict it. Once it's de-restricted, it's de-restricted. And as a private owner, now you're obligated to only sell it to people that are qualified to buy the bike. So there's a lot of deals with that, and I'm sure your insurance companies in Australia would not be happy to know that you de-restricted a bike. So.
Okay, so let's go on to the throttle stop bolt.
Oh yeah, that's the other one. How do you actually do that? There's tons of videos out there showing people how to do this, and you did it yourself. And oh, I guess maybe I shouldn't have said that, but anyway, there's a lot of videos out there. And what does that actually do? And what are they doing? So Kawasaki obviously has a Ninja 650 engine in their Vulcan S. And what we're going to specifically talk about is the Vulcan S. So you've made the decision to de-restrict it. I'm not going to tell you why or how, but you've made that decision. So you've done that. What you're doing is basically taking a throttle stop bolt out, and it allows you to get full throttle. So I have some pictures of what it looks like with the throttle at rest, at restricted throttle, and at full throttle. So if you wanted to put those in there. But what you'll see in the one picture is I have a little silver line on the actual rubber piece with the throttle, and then there's two lines next to it. Those two lines, those are 3 millimeters, and those are basically, that is what the service manual calls free play. When you have your throttle, you don't want more than 3 millimeters of free play. 2 to 3 millimeters is what they're saying. You can grab the throttle and twist it, and before you ride, you need to make sure that when you open the throttle up, it actually returns back, right? The springs pull the throttle back to stop. What I've done is I've marked mine so that I can easily tell if I've gone beyond that free play. So that just shows where the one silver line is at rest and where the free play is. Now, there's another picture. What I did is I took a nail, because in the United States, we don't have restricted motorcycles. So I took a nail and put it in a hole where the throttle bolt is located. And I rotated the throttle down to that stop. And what that basically shows is about a 30 millimeter rotation of the throttle to the stop. That is a restricted motorcycle, 30 millimeters, that's all you're going to get. And that rotation is actually to the throttle blades down in the throttle body. So that's what's restricting your air and fuel mixture into the engine. And that is how they're keeping the engine in that 150 kilowatt to 1 ton, metric ton parameter of power to weight. Now, the minute you pull that off, which I did is I just removed the nail and you rotate the throttle all the way down. Now you're looking at a throttle that's going to about 42, 43 millimeters from the restricted piece. And so what that's telling you is that the throttle is gaining, 11, 12, 13 millimeters of more rotation. That is where you're gaining. And if you do the simple math by percentage, what you'll see is you do the math, is percentage, and then you multiply that times the advertised horsepower of 60, 61 horse. What that does is that gives you a motorcycle engine that's only going to provide 42 to 44 horsepower with a restricted motorcycle. That's all it's basically doing, is it's keeping you from getting full throttle, full air and fuel mixtures. Once you remove that throttle stop bolt, now you're getting full throttle, full air fuel, you're getting the full 60 horsepower. And that is what everybody is seeing and feeling by de-restricting their motorcycles. It's not something that I worry about here in the States because we don't have any restrictions whatsoever on any of our motorcycles. So those of us that ride Vulcan S's here in the States, we just ride. And those of you in Australia, the UK, Europe, possibly other countries, India, other places, there is a restriction there. And we're not advocating any of that, you and I, John. Those are decisions that people have to make themselves as far as the benefits and the risks. So that's what the throttle stop does. End of story.
Okay, now to discuss something that everyone's got an opinion about. The 4-pin plug.
The 4-pin plug, yeah. Oh my goodness, there is so many videos out there and so much debate and so much conversation about what does that 4-pin plug actually do. And you and I have both written to Kawasaki. I wrote to them over a week ago, and in fact, yesterday called their Kawasaki headquarters in California and spoke to an individual about that 4-pin connector. Now, here's the funny part, if you want to consider this funny. I asked them specifically, what is that 4-pin plug? Now, in the service manual, I have a picture of the service manual. I think it's section 16, page 17, shows the electrical diagram of the Kawasaki diagnostic connector port. It's a 4-pin plug, and those wires go pretty much everywhere. But when you look at the wires underneath, they're color coded. And in the owner's manual, the service manual, those colors are called out. Now, on the Vulcan S, every ground wire is a black wire with a yellow stripe. So if you come across the black wire with a yellow stripe, that is a ground wire. And they ground it to the frame, they ground it to the battery, they ground it, they do a great job in grounding. Obviously, there's a lot of electronics on that bike, so they want to make sure everything's protected. So that's the black wire with the yellow stripe. There's a brown wire with a white stripe. That wire, if you follow it through the diagram, goes to what they call a master unit, which I have no clue what that is, goes to some relays. There's 3 banks of relays, and it goes to your fuse box. It basically goes to another connection point where there's multiple wires that come off of it. But I think all of those wires are basically being sent to this master unit, the relays, and the fuse box. The other 2 wires, one's a pink wire with a blue stripe, and the other one is a light green wire. Looks kind of bluish, but it's a light green wire with a black stripe, I think it was. Anyway, those 2 wires go straight to the ECU. So what this diagnostic port does, and I went and talked to my local mechanic. Kawasaki provides these diagnostic tools to their local dealers. And what he said was he's only used it once. It was like on a Vulcan 800 or 900. It had some charging problems. And so he plugged it in, and they found out it was one of the rectifiers, I guess, inside the alternator. Something electrical was not charging the battery. The guy was always having battery problems. And so they changed all that out, and he had no problems. In 3 years, 4 years that he's had this thing, he's only used it one time. So it's not a big thing that they use. And so there's that. So it's basically this diagnostic connection port, the 4 pins. In America, we have that, but as there's the picture I took of when you pull that cap off, other than having a rubber O-ring seal, there is nothing inside that cap. Nothing, absolutely nothing. And then you took a picture of the 4-pin plug that you have, and that particular cap has 2 pins that go down into that plug. And when you look at the top of that cap on the American version, There's nothing. There's no wires. There's no jumpers. There's nothing. It's just the cap. It basically seals off the connection port for the diagnostic tool and keeps it safe. On your version, John, those two pins go down into those other ports, if you will. And one of those is a black and yellow port. And both of the wires on top of your connector are black and yellow, which means they're grounding them. Kawasaki is pretty specific that their black wires with yellow stripes are grounding wires. So on the grounded one, it actually grounds out. The other one is that pink wire with the blue stripe. That wire, based on the electrical diagram, goes to the ECU. And what you were telling me is that there's a black and yellow wire on top that connects to the other black and wire on top, and they're going someplace. My only assumption, and this is factual data, the black and yellow wires in Kawasaki's book, those are grounded. So what Kawasaki is doing is they are grounding that one pink wire with the blue stripe. And that pink wire with the blue stripe goes to the ECU. So there's something within the ECU that they're grounding. That's what they're doing. Now, what does that do? I have no clue. We can debate this till the moon falls out of the sky. You said that the dealer told you that they don't pull that off to de-restrict it. And you also told me that the dealer said that he ran a motorcycle on the dyno and there was no difference with horsepower or whatever. So what Kawasaki's doing with a restricted motorcycle, a Lamb's bike, by grounding that one pin to the ECU, I don't know. And I would just say this, obviously it's important that that plug remains dry and free of water, oil, dirt, and other things, because there's two pins there that go right to the ECU. If for some reason you pull the thing off, and I've seen videos where people are just taping them off, okay, but understand that a little bit of water, a little bit of condensation into those pins could potentially short out your ECU. Now, I've not seen or heard anybody that has pulled that plug off that had problems, that they were getting engine codes or their bike ran funny or there was any other issues. So what it actually does, I couldn't tell you. So I'm 98% sure that at this point, the de-restriction part is basically pulling that throttle bolt off, that stop. That allows you an additional, I don't know, 30% more throttle, at least 11 or 12 millimeters of rotation on your throttle. That's going to make a huge difference.
Well, Alan, there's two things. The Kawasaki dealer dyno tested a Vulcan S with and without the wire here in Australia. And he said there was no difference at all. And now the 4-pin plug is a diagnostic plug. So it's there for mechanics to diagnose what the codes of the ECU, so they can see what's going on with the bike. And it has nothing at all to do with adjusting the fuel or airflow or giving more power to the bike.
And if the dealer has run a Vulcan S on the dyno and found no difference, then I'd have to go at this point. That's a point of fact, evidence, and I'd have to go with his summation that there is no horsepower gain by taking that pin thing off. What you potentially could be doing is opening up the diagnostic port, that connector, to potential contamination from water, dirt, and oil, which could potentially down the road give you other problems. But yeah, as long as I would say this, if your bike is running good and it's running the way you want it, I would kind of just leave it alone. The throttle stop is where you're gaining the horsepower, because like I said, it's 150 kilowatts per metric ton. That's a power to weight ratio, and there you take the weight of the bike, you multiply it times some factors, and you'll come up with a horsepower rating that you have to have in order to meet the learner approved motorcycle regimen. And that's all Australia is doing. They've decided that there was too many riders, young, old, or whatever, getting killed on the highways with high-powered motorcycles. So they've restricted people to 650 cc's and X amount of horsepower per weight of the bike. That's what they're doing.
Okay. Well, that's it then, Alan.
Yeah, I think we're pretty much done with the debate about what the 4-pin plug does or doesn't do. I mean, I can obviously point to electrical diagrams and the rest of it and show people based on Kawasaki's own diagrams from the service manual where these wires go and what they do. And we have proof from your motorcycle in Australia and from my bike in the US what that 4-pin plug is. Now, I don't know in India, Malaysia, UK, Europe, I don't know. Once you pull that 4-pin thing off, if it looks like mine where there's nothing in it, then obviously it has nothing to do with anything. If it's like yours where there's a couple of pins, they're grounding the ECU pin. That's all they're doing. And I don't know what that does. So that's the debate.
Okay, no worries. Well, thank you, Alan. See you later, mate.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoy these videos, subscribe to the channel. The Quacker John Vulcan S show is on every Friday night at 10 PM Brisbane, Australia time. You are most welcome to join in. You are most welcome to join the Quacker John chat room, and the link for your invitation to join the chat room is in the comments under the video. I published a book called My Kawasaki Vulcan S Adventures, and it is available on the Amazon website. See ya!